Good afternoon. So I'm still convinced that the Swampcalla, that Cruel Boys is the way to build your general in Big Wagh. So let's go a little bit more in detail. Let's look at Gnashtoof versus Swampcalla as general in Big Wagh. Thanks to my patron Panda, Wybarian makes good art, buy some dice. So I guess the first question from a first principles perspective is, what do we want the general to actually do in our list in Big Wagh? Well, we want them to stay safe for the entire game. We need Wagh points early, so I think that after, let's say, in most of my games, after I've generated my D6 Wagh points for turn 3, I tend to have 20 Wagh points. Because at that stage in the game, you are generating 3d6 plus 9 Wagh points. So on average, with 3d6, you'll end up with 10. And so you're sitting at 19 Wagh points. So by the time you've generated Wagh points on turn 3, you tend to easily be 20 plus Wagh points. And then we need the general to stay alive late into the game because we need our grand strategy because most of the time in Big Wagh I'm taking Wagh, so either our general or a battle line has to be wholly within enemy's territory. So that's kind of what we need our general to do. Stay alive, generate points, get us our grand strat if needed. So the Swampcalla would most likely need to be teleported for the grand strategy, but Gnashtoof is fast at 10 inches, I believe, and then also has Fasten. So the Gnashtoof independently is better at achieving our grand strategy, while the Swampcalla is going to need a little bit of support. It's not unreasonable in turn 4 to move Fasten the Gnashtoof, and then on turn 5 to move him again, right? Like that, all of that is doable. I guess in one turn with the Gnashtoof you could go 26 inches, and then the next turn you could go 16 inches. And then of course 26 plus 16 is 42 inches, so you're kind of spanning the board almost at this point. Okay, so another thing that we need our general to do is to slap back against anything that comes into the castle. The general tends to sit in the center of the castle, and besides staying alive and generating Wagh points, being able to hurt anything that comes into the castle is a good secondary function for a Big Wagh general to do. So the Gnashtoof obviously is going to be better in combat than the Swampcalla Shaman, but we don't really want our general getting into combat. That's not the role of the general. If the general goes into combat, it means the general has a chance of dying in combat, and we would rather the general stay out of combat. So Blizzard on the general is obviously a better slapback tool. If your opponent is looking at your castle and they're debating whether or not they want to come into the castle and charge into Ardboys, let's say, if they're looking at the Gnashtoof, they're like, okay, whatever. But if they're looking at Blizzard, it's like, well, that's terrifying. So Blizzard as a spell is scarier to come into than a Gnashtoof. So let's look at some of the pros of each unit. So the Gnashtoof, Fasten helps us with our grand strat, of course. The Gnashtoof is moderately fighty. You can see here in the bottom left-hand corner, for those of you that are watching, that the Gnashtoof is all by himself, is on the charge, is putting out about 6.75 wounds against a 4-up save. And when the +1/+1 from Big Wagh clicks in, this jumps up to 8.25 damage, and it's hyper points efficient. This might be the most efficient unit in all of Greenskins. It might be 120 points now? Geez, this thing is efficient. I know that Aaron Newbaum is running, or at least experimenting with, a list where I think you just run six Gnashtoofs and you just throw them at your opponent, and it's just so cost effective. It's like you're looking at 60 wounds on a 3-up save, right? And it's like they get bonuses on the charge. It's just so much damage per point that it's like, this is where we're getting into that range in Cruel Boys, right? Where it's like we race to the bottom, and then we hit a certain points threshold, and then bam, spam. Here's a 6 Gnashtoof list. It's so bad for the game. Like, it just really shows how rough Cruel Boys are, where it's like, yeah, suddenly I can spam 6 Gnashtoofs and win games. It's like, it's just silly. It's just silly. Another advantage that the Gnashtoof has is he can take Super Sneaky. So the Swampcalla Shaman cannot take Super Sneaky. So he can move Gobsprack, essentially. Or you could also do like a unit of Hobgrots and move them. And Super Sneaky is a powerful ability, right? It's one of the best abilities in the Cruel Boys book. So the Gnashtoof himself is also better at enabling battle tactics. So Surround and Destroy, especially with Fasten, the Gnashtoof can run off hopefully safely. Because here we are again where it's like we're putting our general in a riskier position that we need to. But we're going to, use him to get Surround and Destroy. Or we could also use Lead into the Maelstrom. Because our Swampcalla Shaman is not going to be charging in, but this is a hero that can indeed charge in. So fundamentally the pros of the Gnashtoof is that he's faster, so he's able to enable grand strategies and battle tactics better. He's going to be fightier, which is kind of a small benefit, and he can take Super Sneaky. So I mean, all around, like, these are all good things. Like, these are all pros. I personally run into problems trying to find a Fasten target in my Big Wah lists since the new Iron Jaws came out, because I can't just take like the Mega Boss on Makrusha is less. He fits into my lists a lot less conveniently. Cool. So the pros of the Swampcalla. So Blizzard. Shaman of the Chilled Lands gives us more spell flexibility. Hoarfrost is really good in our army. Choking Mist is a really good spell. Blizzard is really good in our army. So it's like, if we're throwing in a Swampcalla Shaman, at least in my lists, it's like we have a Weird Knob Shaman who's going to cast, who has the great big green hand of Gork, and a Wurgog Prophet who has Hoarfrost. So, we have our teleport spell, cool, but then we can do like Hoarfrost on the Weird Knob, on the Wurgog Prophet, and we can do Blizzard on the Swampcalla Shaman. Or we can do a Death Mask, the Wurgog Mask on the Wurgog Prophet, and we can still do Hoarfrost on the Swampcalla Shaman. Or we can do Blizzard and the Wurgog Mask. In my last game, I played against, in my local league here, I played against Slaves to Darkness, and I Blizzarded him 3 times, and Wurgog Masked him 3 times, like first 3 turns, because, you can deploy so close in combat that it's like, okay, so my Swampcalla Shaman General is going to be within 12 inches of your front line. Because he's one of the last models I placed on the table. It's like, cool, and the Wurgog's going to do the same thing. Phenomenal. I think that Blizzard is the strongest thing of all the things that we're going to talk about today, personally. Another advantage of Swampcalla Shaman is that he fits a lot, not he personally, but he enables battalions a lot more easily. The problem with Gnashtoof is that he's 10 wounds. So he doesn't count as like a foot hero. He has to take up like that I can't remember the terminology, but like, you know what I'm talking about? Like in a battle regiment, it's like you can have 1 hero and then 2 other heroes that have 9 wounds or fewer. So the Gnashtoof has a hard time fitting into those battalions, and especially if we're going to run Gobsprack, it's like suddenly, it starts to be a little bit more challenging. So with a Swampcalla Shaman, I can take Wizard Finders, which is cool. He can also fit into the Andorian Acolytes battalion, which is also really good. Another pro of the Swampcalla Shaman is, it's a very small bonus, but it's the elixir or poison that he can dish out. And most of the time, like what I've started doing now in my Big Wah lists, is I'm sort of keeping Gobsprack close to the Swampcalla Shaman, especially early on in the game, because I'm going to use Sneak Up as a battle tactic, so they tend to hang out together close to a piece of terrain. And then if I want Gobsprack to go in, then I can just either give him the +1 save or the poison and send him in. This is also like, you can also do some kind of silly save stacking stuff where it's like, well, I'm going to give him the elixir to give him +1 save. He's going to use their finest hour to get +1 save. He's going to cast Mystic Shield on himself to give himself another +1 save. And then if I need to, I can use All Out Defense. So I'm on a 4-up save, ignoring 3 rend. So it's like, suddenly, Gobsprack can actually become a lot more survivable. I know there's not a lot of 3 rend running around, but being on a 4-up save against 1 or 2 rend with Gobsprack, it feels good. It feels good. When you need it to go off, like, it can be good. You can also, use the elixir and send Gobsprack away, and then use, his other, like their finest hour on the following turn. And even the poison. Like, Gobsprak throws a lot of dice, right? He throws, I'm looking at it right now, 8 dice, which isn't a ton, but he throws 8 dice. So you're looking at a couple of venom-encrusted weapon procs, right? At least just on 6s. And if he's throwing 8 dice, and then you suddenly have 5 up venom-encrusted weapons, well, you're probably going to get 1 or 2 extra venom-encrusted weapon procs. And against some armies, or against some units that have good saves, like, you know, like the Stinger, for example, is only 1 attack, but it has D6 damage. So if you can, you know, it's like a 1 in 3 chance that you're going to deal D6 mortal wounds. It's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. So, and, you know, Gobsprak doesn't have a ton of rend. Like, all his attacks are either 1 rend or 0 rend. And so all of a sudden, you know, if you're like, well, I'm going to throw, and I'm not including the backup stab here because that's a companion, so it doesn't get venom-encrusted weapons. So it's like, well, I'm going to throw 8 dice. Most of it is going to be 2s and 2s with 1 rend, and there's a 1 in 3 chance that every die I roll has a venom-encrusted weapon proc. Like, his damage goes up, and Gobsprak is like a mid-fighty kind of hero. Like, he's okay, you know? But if all of a sudden you can throw out a whole bunch of, like, mortal wounds, like, his damage just increases significantly. So there's definitely some play involving the Swampcalla Shaman and Gobsprak where, you know, you're either elixiring or poisoning. So, but I don't know. I feel like my final sort of conclusion, where I'm sitting at right now with Big Wagh, is certainly I'm a big fan of the Swampcalla Shaman. I think the Swampcalla Shaman is better. We don't really need Fasten on our general. We don't really need a ton of extra support in battle tactics. We tend to be really low, really high drops. Like my list is 14 drops. And so Super Sneaky is still good, but not as good when we are taking Gobsprak and putting him forward up the table to try to deny magical dominance. We don't want to put him in a position where he can be killed on turn 1. If our opponent is deploying their wizards far back, Super Sneaky isn't as good. I would prefer Super Sneaky in lists where we were running at least 1 other Cruel Boy unit. So like just Hobgrots, for example, so we could put them in like in a more forward position. And again, it's like we don't want the Gnashtoof to get into the fight. So I feel like the benefits that the Gnashtoof brings are all kind of like they're fine and they're okay, but I think that what the Swampcalla Shaman brings to the table is significantly better. I also forgot to mention that the Swampcalla is an Andorian locus on some maps, and on some maps that matters. On some maps it's a detriment, but on some maps it matters. But I think the Andorian Acolytes Battalion is better. I think Wizard Finders is better, and last but not least, I think that the Blizzard is the way to go. That Blizzard is absolutely the spell that makes or breaks games. We've all been there. We're all almost tired of Blizzard in the meta. Am I wrong? But just being able to have that as an option, and then also Hoarfrost, like when it matters, it's gonna matter so much more than any other thing on this list, in my opinion. So tell me what you think. Are you playing Big Wagh? Are you playing some of these units? Are you having a good time? How's Big Wagh feeling to you after all these changes? Join the Discord. Tell me what you think. And if you become a patron, I will agree with every single thing that you say, no matter what. Like, subscribe, Wagh.